Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Dial It Up. Now we're going to be continuing on with our resource explanations. So we have number 2 of the 3 brand new resources that have recently come out. And this is the Rock of Eternity. Ooh, Rock of Eternity. Okay, starting this off. Force construction. The Rock of Eternity costs 14 points. At least 1 and up to 7 distinct stins may be included on your force and cost 2 points each. So the least amount you're going to see this at is 16. The most amount you're going to see this at is 28. Now this does cost less than the Pandora's Box. However, this is going to be assigned to just one singular character rather than a resource that your entire team can have access to. And also mentioning the distinct part of that is that it has the 7 deadly sins. It even has their names on there. So you have to have one of each. Well, you don't have to have one of each, but you can only have one of each. You can't be doubling up your sins. So, assign. When you build your force, the Rock of Eternity is assigned to a character on your force with a point value of 50 or more. The assigned character is called your champion. Your champion can use the standard powers indicated by the Shazam dial when it is assigned the same number of tokens indicated next to the slot. When a special power on an attached sin is showing on either the Shazam or sin dial, your champion may use its effect. Alright, so, breaking that down. This is going to be assigned to a certain character during force construction, so what to note on that is that it always has to be the same champion when you're in a tournament. Going into the game, it has to be applied to that character. That's not going to be switching every game that you play because that's something that's going to happen during force construction, which happens before the games ever get started. And the character does have to be 50 points or more. So no little guys are going to be your champion. The next part is that the character assigned it is called your champion. So any time further on in the card of the resource, when they mention your champion, that's the guy that's assigned this resource. This resource has 2 different dials. It's got the Shazam dial and the Sin dial. So you're going to be using the standard powers on here. There's 3 different slots on here, and those are going to correspond with pack powers. Your character is going to use those powers depending on how many action tokens he has. She has. They have. And then, corresponding, we also have the Sin dial, which is actually more in tune with the sins that are on here. We'll get into that later. But there are also special powers that show up on the Sin dial that your character is going to be using the special powers anytime that those show up. Setup. At the beginning of the game, first thing you do, choose red, Cunning Path, or blue, Mighting Path. And then, depending on which one you choose, turn the Shazam dial to the starting line of the chosen color and only use click numbers of that color this game. Second thing you do, instead of placing objects, place up to 3 sins on the map. Each sin must be placed at least 5 squares away from each other, any starting area, and each in its own row and column. The remaining sins are added to your sideline. The Sin dial begins the game on click 1. This Sin dial can't turn to a click lower than click 1 or higher than click 20. Alright, so this is something that's going to happen at the beginning of the game. So when you're in a tournament, you can choose which path you're choosing each round that you go. Each game that you play, you can choose which way you're going to play this. So there are 2 different lines of click numbers on the Shazam dial down here. So it starts off with either red or blue. Now, once again, the blue on ours looks black. It could just be the lighting in here. And the blue doesn't actually have a starting line on most of them. It happens after red, click number 8. Click number 8 is KOs. After that, you've got blue number 2, or the blue dial. Click number 1 for blue. And then the next thing you're going to do for this is that you're going to arrange your sins, is how I'm going to say it. You can place up to 3 on the board. Now, specific language there, up to 3, which means you can place 0, 1, 2, or 3. If you place any, you do not place objects. Any sins that you have remaining on the resource that are not placed on the board are going to go into your sideline. The thing to note about that is that you're going to pay for all of this first during your force construction and then set up how you want to do it. So if you happen to have extra sins on your sideline, normally your sideline, you don't pay for that stuff. That's just extra stuff that can be brought into the game later on. This is kind of a special thing where you're actually paying for this stuff and then putting it on your sideline. So don't pile up on extra sins on the sideline because they're not going to work with the resource. The only ones that work with the resource are the ones that you paid for during force construction. When you do decide to place them on the board, they have to be at least 5 squares away from any starting area, so typical relic rules there, but then also 5 squares away from each other, and they all have to be in their own separate rows or columns. Rows, columns. So you can't have a sin here and one down here. It's got to be somewhere else. It's got to be its own section. And then, of course, the sin dial, it's going to move a lot throughout the game. So it's not going to go lower than its starting line, and it's not going to go beyond its final click, which is click number 20. Imprisoning the sins. At the beginning of your turn, if your champion doesn't have 2 action tokens, you may attach a sin from your sideline to this resource. Give the champion a free action when it occupies a square with a sin placed by you, and attach it to the resource. Each time you attach a sin, turn the Shazam dial to the click number equal to the number of sins attached. So there's 2 things you're going to be doing there. The beginning of each turn, grab one of those sins that you placed on the sideline at the beginning of the game, pop it on the resource. Next thing you can do is that if your character occupies the same space as a sin placed by this resource, give it a free action, bring that on there. Now, it's not a power action like the Pandora's box. It is a free action, so then you can continue. You can either move to that square and pick it up, or pick it up and continue on doing something else. The other thing that's very important to note in that description is that it says this resource. If your opponent is also playing the Rock of Eternity and you decide that you want to go after his sins, you do have to make a relic roll for that. These sins are going to be placed on the board as regular relics. So yes, your opponent, as well as friendly characters, can do a regular relic roll to try and pick them up. If you do pick up your opponent's relic roll, or make the relic roll for your opponent's relic to their Rocket of Eternity, you're basically just cutting off their access to that relic. It will not go onto your resource. It will just go onto your character card as if it was a regular relic. And then you get to turn your Shazam dial based on how many you have on there. So you'll see that there's just 7 clicks, and those will give you the amount of powers, or sorry, the powers that you're going to choose from, or rather not choose from, but which ones you're allowed access to. And you'll notice there's a 0, a 1, and a 2. So those are based on your action tokens. You have 0 tokens, you get the top power. You have 1 token, you get the middle power. You have 2 tokens, you get the bottom power. So as you go along, you'll see that these powers do change, and they'll give you access to them based on your action tokens. Unlock the power of Shazam. At the beginning of your turn, when your champion has no action tokens, you may roll 2d6 that can't be re-rolled and add the current click number from the Shazam dial. If the result is 16 or more, give your champion a double power action, attach any unattached sins to this resource, and turn the Shazam dial to click number 9. Right. So if you have no action tokens, at the beginning of your turn, roll 2d6. Add it to your click number. Now your click number is going to correspond to how many sins you have. So basically just think of how many sins you have. It does say click number, but they're the same thing in this instance. So add those 2 up. If it makes 16, you get to go on to your Shazam Call Down the Lightning. If not, carry on with your day. Now, the one thing to note is that you do have to add it up and make 16 or more. So the first time you can actually do this is if you have 4 sins on here, because 4 plus 12 is 16, basic math. So yeah, good luck on that critical. But then once that happens, you give the character a double power action, and then you change it to click number 9. So that's why it says that you have to have no action tokens, because you can't give a character a double power action if it has action tokens. So you have to be free of action tokens to be able to do that. And then that's pretty much your turn, because you're giving him a double power action, and now he's spun to his Shazam golden spot.
Shazam!
The other thing to note on that is that it says that any unattached sins are going to go on to the resource. So remember how I was saying that friendlies or opponents can roll for your relics and put them on their cards? If they do that and you manage to be lucky enough to get that 16 to call down the lightning, you get to take those back and bring them onto your resource. So they can hold it off for you for a little bit, but if you do get your full power of Shazam, they're not going to keep that away from you forever. Count your sins. Each time 1 or more action tokens are placed on an opposing character, you may turn the sin dial once clockwise. Each time 1 or more action tokens are placed on your champion, turn the sin dial once counterclockwise. So that's what I'm saying about the sin dial is going to move a lot. So every time your opponent puts down an action token, click the sin dial the regular way. Every time you put down an action token, you click it the opposite way. So as you move the sin dial along, you'll see that you'll have colored squares show up, as well as special powers. The colored squares correspond with the actual sins that are there. So the first one that shows up is envy. And then the next one is sloth. Then we get pride. Then we get greed. And then we get lust. Now, to actually show it on the dial, it is gray. Lust, in all instances, is white. But they didn't want to do a black bordered colored thing on the dial. So on the dial, he is gray.
He's kind of a murky.
Physically, he's white. Anyway, so that's lust. Whenever a gray square shows up, that's lust. And then there's going to be special powers on there. Those are the special powers that are on the card, and you get to use those powers when they show up. Now, so going on to the special powers that are there. Number 1. Now, number 1 is the power that actually you get from calling down the lightning. When you hit your Shazam sweet spot, you go to click number 9. This is the only time number 1 shows up for this resource. So it is called the Power Personified. Your champion can use Impervious, Probability Control, Pulse Wave, Running Shot, the Mystic's team ability, and has the wing symbol and Indomitable. Your champion has a range value of 8 if his print value is less. So the only thing to note on that is that if you already have a 10, 9, 10 range printed on your actual champion, it's not going to bring it back down to 8. It is 8 if it's not already 8. So if you have more range, keep your more range. And that is also that they have the flight symbol and Indomitable. So, sorry, the wing symbol is going to give you flight and carry, and Indomitable gives you the willpower. Now, it says can use Impervious, Running Shot, Pulse Wave, Probability Control, and Mystic's team ability. These are powers that won't be countered because you can't counter a can use. But it says that you have the wing symbol and the Indomitable symbol, which means that those are combat abilities that you possess and can be countered, even though they're coming from the resource. Number 2. This is a power that's going to show up on the sin dial when that gets clicked around. Giving in to sin. Give your champion a free action and turn the sin dial 3 clicks counterclockwise. When you do, choose 1 attached sin and your champion can use its effect until the next turn, even if this power is lost. So once that shows up on your sin dial, action tokens have been placed, now you get this power, and you're going to now bring that back down. The first time it shows up is actually click 4 So clicking it 3 times counterclockwise brings you back down to click 1. And then doing that, there's nothing showing on the dial, so you get to pick whatever power you want. It's pretty useful, actually, because then you don't have to wait for it to show up. Now you get to pick which one you want. And then that's going to last till your next turn, even if it's lost. Now, they do have to put that clause in there, even if it's lost, because usually powers like that, as soon as you click away from it, it goes away, but the power is making you click away from it, so you have to put that clause in there being, even though it's lost, you're still getting this ability. Number 3, Growing Temptation. Your champion may immediately choose one attached sin and use its effect until the sin dial is clicked again. So as you go further down into sin dial, more action tokens are being placed, and you're not placing as much to counteract that. You're going to get number 3 there, and then that lets you to immediately choose which sin that you want out of the 7, or out of the ones that are attached there. You may not have all 7 of them yet. And you get to use that until the sin dial is clicked again. So basically, if you're going to pick a power or pick a sin that you want and then make an action based on that sin, you're clicking that dial right away because you're giving your character an action token. So that's one of the ones where, unlike number 2, where it lasts until the next turn, this lasts until the next action token that gets placed, basically. Number 4, Evil Seduction. Your champion may immediately choose 2 attached sins and use both of their effects until the sin dial is clicked again. Same deal, except this time now you get 2 of the powers that you want to choose on. And number 5, now this is at the very end of the dial. So there's got to be a lot of action tokens being placed for this. Ultimate Transgressor. Your champion uses the effects of all attached sins until the sin dial is clicked again. So then you have access to everything that's on there. More than likely, everything will be on there by the time that you get to the end of this dial. This shows up on click number 20. That's the very end of the sin dial. Now, the other thing to note, as I've been talking about putting down action tokens and clicking this dial, is that any instance of a token, an action token being placed, will click this dial. So we're talking about Incapacitate, Theme Prob, CSA Prob, anything that says that you're going to put an action token on a character, that's going to move this dial. So depending on the team you're up against, this dial is going to move like crazy. Alright, so that was the Rock of Eternity. If there's anything you guys think that I didn't cover, any questions you have, just comment down below, and we'll see you guys again for another episode of Dial It Up.
Married with Clix is brought to you by Majestic's Heroclix sales down in Costa Mesa, California. Right now, they're in the middle of storefront change. In the meantime, don't forget to check out their eBay store. If you check the link down below, they always have great Heroclix stuff at fantastic prices, and they'll ship just about anywhere.